This is Dr. Harvey Robbins again. I got an email last night from a friend asking me if I'd make a few comments about the ongoing email scandal and why Director Comey felt the need to reopen the investigation and all the anxiety that that's created and all the innuendo that that's created. Just to let you know, I've worked with the FBI over the years in different capacities as a psychologist, I have a very high opinion of the people who work at the FBI. Keeping in mind, though, that Director Comey is sort of a politically appointed position, but he still represents the good men and women who work for the FBI. And these people are straight arrows, I got to tell you. I remember I was doing a presentation to a group of agents a number of years ago about teamwork and different personalities. And just out of curiosity, because my son at the time had just become an Eagle Scout, I asked the group how many of them were Eagle Scouts. And more than half of them raised their hands. So it just shows you the kind of people who make up the force of the FBI. But in order to sort of give you a clearer view of my opinion about what's going on, I wanted to sort of do a little analogy, a little story that since this is World Series season, it's an appropriate kind of baseball analogy. There was a kid who, during the seventh inning stretch, had approached these three umpires standing on the sideline and was asking them how they determined what was a ball and what was a strike. One of the umpires said, "Well, kid, some are balls and some are strikes, and I calls them as they are." And the second umpire said, "Well, kid, some are balls and some are strikes, and I calls them as I sees them." And the third one says, "Well, kid, some are balls and some are strikes, but none of them are anything until I calls them." So that's what's going on here a little bit with the email controversy. There's an issue here of truth and perception. The controversy is what's legal, what's really required legally, and if there's any legal room from a moral position. Legally, you're not allowed to have what are considered classified information that would put the national security at risk on any device or communicate it to anyone who doesn't have the appropriate clearance. Now, when I worked for the government, I had TS clearance, and I got confidential information occasionally because of the people that I was dealing with. But that's information that you just never share. Now, the question is, Hillary Clinton, for example, was saying all along, well, I didn't know if any of this stuff was really classified, which kind of stretches the boundaries of imagination a little bit, because things are either classified or they're not classified. And there's an organization that determines what should be considered a classified piece of information. The whole purpose for that is to keep information that might be sensitive, might help our enemies know something about us, out of the hands of people who might want to do us some harm. That's the whole purpose of this whole confidentiality stuff. Legally, you're not supposed to communicate it with someone who doesn't have the appropriate clearance level, and there are different clearance levels. And you're not supposed to have it on devices that might potentially be hacked by outside sources. The theory is that the government email sites are more protected. People can argue whether they are or not based on people's attempts to hack them from other countries, for example. But the issue is some's balls and some strikes, but they're nothing until they call them. So Comey is in a position of saying, I've got all this evidence that says that there is classified information that should not have been put on these devices or communicated to people who didn't have the appropriate clearance. That's clearly a violation of the law. However, and this is the big issue on this, Comey comes from a prosecutor's mental state. And a prosecutor trying to get justice will say, can I get a jury of people to convict this person if I indict them? An indictment is just a charge brought against someone. So he could indict Hillary Clinton, but then he has to ask himself, can I get 12 normal American people out there at random to agree that this person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And if the prosecutor feels that they can't get a completely unbiased group of people to say, yes, that person's guilty, then they just usually don't bring the charges forward. That's why when Comey brought all those incidences of lying essentially to the FBI, which is another crime, by the way, and Hillary Clinton says, well, I didn't really lie because it wasn't really classified information. That's where the perceptual differences of balls and strikes comes in. They can't guarantee that they're going to get people who are willing to say, no, that's a strike. Everyone sees it as a strike. Some people are going to see it as a ball or give her a certain pass. That's one of the reasons why he didn't bring it forward, the charges to begin with, because he couldn't get anyone to agree to prosecute her. Secondly, the FBI has an obligation to make sure that they have as much accurate and complete information as possible. Coincidentally, they happen to be working on a separate investigation against Anthony Weiner, and happened to get a hold of his laptop, seized his laptop as part of the investigation. On there were additional emails that looked like they were communications between Uma Abedin, which is at the time her Anthony Weiner's wife, and Hillary Clinton. Now the question is, do those additional emails, could they add to finding out whether there was actual classified information that was labeled as classified that was on some device that shouldn't have been? So, another clear-cut case of, is it a strike or not? They don't know until they take a look. My guess is chances are, if this was information on a shared laptop, that it was including stuff that had nothing to do with anything that was classified. At worst, it would probably reveal some strategies about how to deal with different opposing groups, like the kinds of emails that are brought up by WikiLeaks about John Podesta's emails, people calling each other nasty names behind the scenes and repudiating people's reputations. That's the normal stuff, the junk that goes back and forth in emails and politics. But he felt an obligation to tell Congress and to make sure that the investigation was complete and thorough. My opinion is not going to find anything that they don't already know. And if they do, it's going to fall into the same categories they did before. Will he be able to find anyone who would agree that this is a clean strike and not maybe something on the edge that they would allow? So there's a difference between what's legally legal and what's sort of morally objectionable. So it puts Director Comey in what I call the ethical dilemma, where he has an ethical obligation to bring this forward. The dilemma is, it may influence the election, and they're not supposed to do that, and he knows that, and he's trying to avoid that. But he was torn between his obligation to be thorough and the obligation to not affect the election. So he's caught in between a rock and a hard place on this. So I don't know if that helps you in terms of trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong here. You already have probably assumed one way or another based on your own personal preferences. But I have a feeling that, I feel really sorry for Director Comey being put in this particular position, because supposing Hillary Clinton gets elected, if she does, Comey still has 7 years left on his appointment. And he was appointed by Obama 3 years ago. So he has to serve a 10-year term as head of the FBI. So, that's going to be a little awkward later on. Well, I hope this helped clarify for you this issue of the email scandal and Director Comey's role in this whole reopening of the case. Thanks.